Hola muchachos! Welcome back. Yesterday I was working on doing a lot of like the boring stuff on the RX-7. I got all of the hot side components Cerakoted, lower intake manifold Cerakoted as well, because a lot of people were suggesting, hey, if you're Cerakoting, do the lower intake manifold because it sits so close to the exhaust manifold that it'll prevent some heat transfer. So we did that. I also spent way more time than I wanted to polishing the turbo. I think the polished look was the right move. It is my first time polishing stuff, and dear Lord, does it take a lot of time. Tell me that don't look good, right? I still have to polish the intake manifold some more. I still have to do the throttle body, but I did get the turbo for the most part done. I'd say that came out pretty well for my first time polishing. Like I said, that took a lot of time to be able to like even get it to look like that, so I'm pretty happy with that. I got both of the external wastegates on. The exhaust manifold is permanently on, so all of that hot side stuff is pretty much done. Right now we have a problem with the RX-7 that I need to... It's already been addressed, but we need to remedy it once that stuff comes in. That's gonna be our engine harness. So I've been going back and forth a lot the past like couple of days trying to figure out what to do with this. They still make those engine harnesses. It's just that they're like $1,200 to $1,400. You can get an aftermarket harness for that same price. And since we're using a standalone, I actually ordered the standalone also. So we have a Haltech Elite 2500. My original plan was a 1500 on the car, but I got a 2500 and a wideband 1 for the same price. So a wideband controller for the same price as an Elite 1500. So it made more sense to get the 2500. And then on top of that, I also ordered the Rywire 13B plug and play adapter for the Elite 2500. There's some other Haltech sort sensors that I need to order for the engine, such as like oil pressure, flex fuel, all that stuff, because I would like to run this car in flex fuel. So we're going to be doing that, and the harness is already pinned for it. Get this old S6 engine harness out of here. Old crusty engine harness is out, and then I got distracted. But as you guys can see, this is one of the major reasons why I'm swapping. It's like a stick. It's just so crispy. It's just seen so much heat over the time that engine harness it's expensive. I got a little distracted after doing that. I started doing some other stuff off camera. Came up here to the front of the car and started trying to figure out this wire harness here, because it was just dingle dangling everywhere. Got it tucked back up in its home, got it clipped back in, got this guy down. Two things. First of all, what clip secures the other half of this? If not, I'm gonna make one. Secondly, this wire here, anybody have any ideas on that one? Got the grounds figured out. I was trying to figure out where these went. For some reason I kept thinking they went up here. They do go down here on this front crash bar here. Next up, I also got an order in from Atkins, just a whole bunch of seals, O-rings, oil filter, pulley, all this fun stuff, so we can go through and start getting our oil filter housing on, an oil filter on this thing. Jump in the engine bay, let's start putting more stuff together and get this thing that much closer to running. We are ever so slightly in the future, just a little bit. I got a little bit more work done on the FD, and I was waiting for some parts to come in, and they came in, which is all of the battery relocation stuff. Now that is the battery relocation kit from Petit Racing. I misunderstood the, I guess, product description, because it said it fit in the rear storage bin, and I thought that that meant it fit in the rear storage bin without having to cut it all up. That's not the case. So it looks like with every battery relocation, putting the battery in the rear bins behind the passenger, you got to cut up the bin a little bit. It's not a big deal. We'll do it. It's just I wish I would have understood that a little bit more. Otherwise, I would have just used all the stuff that I bought on Amazon and saved a little bit of money, but it's whatever. It's all here now. I also came up into the engine and I got the OMP plugs put into the actual irons or the rotor housing, so that way they're blocked off. So for this battery relocation, I think what I'm going to do is I need to figure out how to remove these rear bins, which I think I need to take out a lot of stuff to be able to get to those rear bins. So I think I'm just going to make it easier on myself, take the seats out so that way I have more room to move around in here. Got the whole interior out. Let me tell you, it is a little terrifying pulling out the interior of a 30-year-old car with the plastics because they're just so prone to breaking. So back here's where we're going to be putting the battery. Now, I am not looking forward to having to do this. I think I'm gonna have to put some spacers and some shims in some spot because technically this battery does not sit flat. I may take a hammer and smooth out. So I actually will take a hammer and smooth some of that out so that way I can get this thing to sit more flat in there. So let me go through, start getting this like tub shaped for that battery tray, and then I'm gonna have to start cutting the bottom side of this tub to be able to fit our battery and everything in there. I did get this kit does come with a sealed lead acid battery. If you're doing this, you want a sealed battery. You do not want a battery like this, like these yellow tops or something like that. You need a completely sealed battery. Otherwise they can emit gases, things of that nature. Now with this battery relocation kit, they only give you some of the basics. I'm going a couple steps farther. They only have you run the ground wire to the chassis ground. We're gonna be doing that, but we're also gonna be running a ground to the engine. As for the power cable, we are also going to be using an inline amp or an inline 200 amp fuse just to protect the system. We are also going to be installing a power and a ground stud up in the engine bay, so that way it does have direct power and ground from the battery up in the engine bay if we need to utilize these. Sweet, let's start shaping the tub and then we can start getting this battery installed. Successfully made the battery fit in the bins. Look at that. So I need to take the bins back out, clean up all the cuts that I did on it, and then I also need to drill 2 holes for the circuit breaker so we can mount the circuit breaker up in there. But honestly, it's not terrible. It's just kind of time consuming, and with old plastic, it all just kind of wants to break. So, you know, it fits well. I'll show you guys the cuts after I get them all cleaned up, but battery's in there. Sick. I've got the actual tray portion done, everything set up in there. I still need to run the wires, but we'll do that here in a second. I want to kind of walk through this. When cutting this tray, leave the whole back edge like this if you're doing this, and that inner 90 right there, and just cut this front portion in the very bottom. If you guys look in there, you can see it's a tight fit, but it fits. I've got the 200 amp circuit breaker here. These are the fuel pump fuses. They are all wired up. We've got our ground and our power cable. I do have the primary feed to the circuit breaker off right now and I still have to make one, but I don't even want to worry about making one right now until that time comes because I don't want to supply the car with power. But look at that. And then you just close it, battery, fuses, everything just tucked away in there so nicely. I need to find a way to route this power cable up into the engine bay. I don't know where I'm going to put it yet. I'd like to have it on the driver's side to keep it away from turbo and all the hot components. There's a bug around me, fuck off. So I'm trying to find some grommets or like a firewall pass through, something where I can get a cable up in here, because ideally I'd like the 2 terminals to be right here so that way I can just easily access them. So let me figure out how I'm gonna get this power cable up here, and we can kind of go from there, because that's kind of the next step of what I need to do with this. So for the most part, the battery is pretty much done. I just need to run the cables from the battery up into the engine bay. I just didn't like any of the ways I could route them, so I ordered some more 4-gauge wire to be able to do that. And while we were doing that though, our ECU showed up. So we are running a Haltech Elite 2500 for the RX-7. The wideband controller also showed up. So at this point, we almost have literally everything needed to make this car run, which is awesome. So we have our Elite 2500, our wideband controller. The only other things that I'm waiting on, like parts wise to get this car running, is the Greddy V Mount intercooler radiator setup and the catback. Aside from that, I think I have everything else here or ordered to get the RX-7 running. So that's awesome. The harness shows up tomorrow, which will be in this video. But for now, we're gonna jump over to the fuel system and try to wrap that up right now, because I'd like to get that kind of just, I guess I'll show you the battery like set up completely. So boop, there we go. We got our battery all relocated back there. Now let's jump over to the fuel system. So I ran over to the shop and I grabbed my bin of AN fittings. So I got a plethora of AN fittings here to choose from. I've got a brand new thing of -6 line here and -8 line there. So that way we can do all the fuel system. It's gonna be a -8 feed, -6 return on this car. Now I looked it up, series versus parallel on RX-7s. I'm just gonna run it the way I'm familiar with Subarus, because that's the way I prefer when you have multiple fuel rails, and that is in parallel. So that way both fuel rails see the same amount of fuel pressure all of the time. That way there's not one fuel rail that's getting priority over the other. So this is our primary fuel rail down here. These have ID 1300s in them. This is our secondary fuel rail. This has ID 1700s in them, which should be plenty for what we're shooting for in the car. Like I said, I only want like 450, 500 out of the setup, but it'll probably do more. It'll probably do more along the lines like 550, maybe 600. I don't know. Those injectors might be a little bit small for 600. Got the fuel feed side of the fuel system done with. I ran a new feed line and a new return line. I decided not to use the line that Radium provides because it just, it had a 45-degree fitting on it. It didn't meet up anywhere where I wanted it to. If you were running a series style fuel system, I'm sure it would work because the line was long enough to reach either fuel rail. But for me, I wanted to run parallel. So we've got our one line coming up. Right here, we've got this one teeing off, going into a 180, feeding the top line. Right here, it splits off, feeds the bottom line. So that's worked out. I've been trying to figure out where the hell to mount this fuel pressure regulator, and I still can't figure it out. So I don't know. I guess I'll keep trying to figure out where to put a fuel pressure regulator. JK, I just made a quick bracket for the fuel pressure regulator. I'm gonna call that like a V1 bracket. I'll make another one later on that's a little more professional looking, but for the sake of getting things going right now, we're gonna rock with that. So I'm gonna go ahead and make the return fuel lines from the rails up to the regulator here, so that way we can kind of complete that. I am gonna have to do a line from the regulator to wherever the ethanol sensor is gonna end up going. I'm not entirely sure yet. I brought the bracket with me so that way we can maybe try to figure it out, but worst case scenario, we get the whole fuel system done with the exception of the ethanol sensor. I'll get one ordered today so that way we can finish up the fuel system here. So sick! Let's make 2 return lines from those rails up to that guy. Both of the return lines done going to the regulator. The last line to make is from the regulator to wherever the ethanol sensor is going, then from the ethanol sensor to the new -6 return line that I just ran up into the engine bay. So we pretty much have our fuel system in the FD done, which is sick, dude. That's like a huge thing to check off the list. So now that our fuel system is pretty much done, I got something really freaking cool in the mail that I've been like excited for because I didn't have to build it and it was a reasonable price, and that is our Rywire Mil-spec grade harness. Now they have a couple offerings for these. I decided on the Mil-spec harness because I know what goes into building harnesses. As you guys have seen, I know how much they cost to build, the connector cost, all that, material usage, and for the price of $1,400 for this thing, I got the grounding kit also with it. For $1,400, they use DR25 on this. DR25 is heat and chemical resistant. We also have a patch harness here and the ground kit here. DR25 is very heat and chemical resistant. With rotaries being very hot engines, as everyone keeps telling me, I wanted something that's going to be able to withstand heat a lot better. That's why we went with the Mil-spec harness, Raychem. I purely bought this harness specifically because it came with Raychem, as their other one does not come with Raychem. So I am very excited for this. This is going to make life incredibly easy on these connectors that go through the firewall. What that does is it plugs directly into the Haltech, and it also plugs directly into the chassis harness to make life incredibly easy. No having to splice anything. The gauges will work. The fuel pump trigger is the same. All of it. Now, thankfully, and I'm really glad they gave us this, is they also gave us the, I guess, the technical data sheet for this harness, which tells us what wire does what, because I'm going to need this to set all of that up in the Haltech. So we got things like our tacho, OMP position. We're not using OMP, so we can change that. That's a free input for us. Fuel pressure, TPS signal, battery, chassis, auxiliary, trailing, leading, spark plugs, all of that. So that way I can set up the Haltech to say, hey, this wire does this wire does that. So I'm gonna go ahead and run this through the firewall, so that way we can start getting this harness plugged in. And hopefully, I don't think I'll be able to power up the Haltech in this video up until our battery relocation is complete, but we should be able to power up the Haltech and get it set up in either, probably the next, it'll be the next video. We're gonna power up the Haltech in the next video. And in theory, once the water pump and the alternator and all that stuff are on, technically start the RX-7 without an intercooler, but probably not a good idea. I don't know, I'm excited for the harness. Let me get the harness in. So I've reached a point now where I need to stop and do some more research before I keep going. I don't know. I have a couple things that I'm not 100% sure on. The oil level sensor, why it's just old. The wire broke off. It's a 30-year-old sensor. Because I'm on a Haltech, I don't know if I need to keep that. There's like things I'm questioning if I can delete or not, and I don't want to start ripping open harnesses to thin them out and start deleting things. There's one fuse box that I need to figure out. It's not the main one here, it's the smaller one up front that used to go on the battery. Now that we've relocated the battery, I have to figure out what I'm gonna do with that, if I can relocate that. Like, there's questions that I don't have the answers to yet, so I need to go do some research. But our Rywire harness is in for the most part. Let me kind of show you guys what I can. It's a little bit dark out, so it's gonna be a little bit difficult to see, but let me show you. So over here on the passenger side, everything just plugs right into the Haltech, man. It makes life so easy. I do need to order the ignition coil harness also for this, which I believe will plug right in here to that guy, which is a Deutsch connector, and then run up into the engine bay for our ignition coils, because we are going to be running the Haltech 1A ones, and I believe there's a mount that'll mount up over there where I had my battery posts, but I guess I'll move those to a different spot again. But dude, it's getting there. So the Rywire harness, I need to tuck this up and away from where the downpipe's going to be. For the most part, I've got everything figured out of where it's all going to go. I need to take that alternator apart and clean it, and then I can permanently install it once we get our water pump in, which has shipped out from Japan, so that's nice. But my big thing is like this. I was gonna just delete this whole thing, and then I started looking up what all these fuses and relays do, and they're like the controls for the headlights, the pop-up. What I'm looking at is there's only a couple wires here. There's four wires there. I could easily extend all those and put that box anywhere I want, and then it's just these little power guys that'll run to this fuse box, and I believe one of them goes to the alternator, and then I would just have to supply that guy with power. And if that's the case, wherever I put the power stud, I could just put this guy right on the power stud and have it off at a 90-degree angle, since it's got that little bracket on there. That's the best case scenario of what I'm seeing here. but I am going to have to figure that out, then moving that guy to wherever we end up putting the power posts, because this is where the coil packs will end up going. And I was like, sick, dude, free real estate right here. Yeah, psych. I also need to order more sensors for this. Somebody told me not to get a knock sensor. The Rywire harness comes with a knock sensor input, so I might as well utilize it. I know making rotaries knock is extremely dangerous and very bad. We're not gonna make it knock, but I mean, it doesn't hurt to have the sensor there, I guess, since it's already pinned for it in the ECM. I feel like we're getting close with the RX-7 to getting it to start here soon. I'm hoping, at least. I need to also find a belt for AC delete. I decided I'm not gonna run AC in the car, mainly for this fact, since rotaries run hot, I don't want another obstruction in front of the radiator, and I'd rather just, I'm gonna drive this car with the windows down anyways. I don't plan on driving it in the rain. If it rains and I drive in the windows fog up, I'll roll down the windows, I'll be fine. So I got for you guys on this one. If you like the video, you know what to do, go hit that like button, turn it black, blue, green, purple, silver, cyan, whatever color it turns for you, and if you're not already subscribed to the channel and you wanna be, put it in one of these corners, no idea which one quite yet, but with that, I'll catch you guys in the next one. So peace out, homies.